So my name is Garrett, and I'm just an average Joe guy, but I'm passionately in love with Jesus, and I want people to know why. It didn't happen because I pursued him and I somehow found this formula that made me feel close to him. It was completely opposite of that. My story, I could not have been wanting to get farther away from God and Jesus and anything related to spirituality at all. And he came like the hound of heaven he is, and he came and tracked me down and until I was done, and he came and loved on me. And in order to understand that, you have to understand part of the story. And the reason why I want to tell part of the story is because I firmly believe there's a couple of you that will be listening to this that are feeling extremely used, feeling abandoned, neglected, frustrated, left behind, worthless, overwhelmed, and I know all of those. I'm very familiar with those feelings in my life and how debilitating they can seem, and how the enemy of your heart will get in there and speak these things that will give you this destiny and will make you feel like you're worthless. And the complete opposite is the truth. You could not be more valuable to the Father heart of God, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So what happened in my story is this, so you can understand what I'm saying. Is my grandfather was a cult leader. He had 60 kids, 13 wives, and he wasn't just a normal, peaceful dude. He believed a lot of things that are really destructive. I mean, he believed things, for example, that certain people, if they did something wrong, then they would have to be killed for it. They would have to shed their own blood for their sins. And he taught people. He taught my father grew up in this environment, so he taught him that. My mother was his daughter, one of his daughters. And my father married my mother in this toxic environment where they were brainwashed to believe these evil things. And so as teenagers, they, and especially my father, would be one of the people he would send out to kill people in cold blood. And it was run very much like a mafia kind of environment. And it was brutal. Well, as the years went along, and I've got to skip over a lot of chapters here for time, but basically what happened was my grandfather ended up going to prison for this and got 4 consecutive life-to-life sentences. My father ended up leaving, but leaving this environment, it was one of the worst things that you could do. And my grandfather, of course, felt betrayed. And since it was like the mafia, he basically made a hit list while he was in prison of 50 or so people that needed blood atonement, meaning they needed to shed their own blood for their sins. My father was on the top of that list, and so were a lot of my other close family members, and so were we. And when I say we, I have 5 other brothers and sisters. At that time, where I'm about to tell you the story, we are between 4 and 14. And this is 1988, and that's when my story really starts to come to the surface. And so basically, this is my, some memories from that time period of my life. I thought we were normal until 1988 when I got news that my father had just been shot in the head, and by his own family members, by his brothers and sisters, and people from the cult who had taken up the cause of my grandfather, who had died in prison, and started killing people. My father was number one, and on the same day, 2 of my uncles died. They were shot as well. And one of my uncles was going up to deliver appliances, and when he knocked on the door, his family was there. They shot him in the head, and my best friend was in the car, which was his daughter. She was 8 years old, just like me. We played all growing up, and she woke up and from the gunshot, and they came, and my grandfather's orders were to kill any eyewitnesses, and so they shot her in the head. And so on the same day, when I was 8 years old, 4 of my closest people were just stripped out of my life, including my hero, which is my father. And it wasn't just that. I knew as an 8-year-old that we were going to die next. And this is a really, really tough thing to live with as a kid. And we were put in the witness protection program for the FBI. We had to change our names. We moved to California for 8 months. Nobody could knew where we were. We had aliases that we went by. And the FBI was on a manhunt to catch as many people as they could. And all these people were a part of my family. It was the craziest thing. My mother was gone a lot. And I remember 8 months later, they said, okay, it's safe enough for your family to move back home. So that's what we did. We moved back home, but my mother never moved back home. She went straight to a mental institution. And she was having really, really tough mental issues. And I remember, this trauma of there's guys with guns in your trees, SWAT team around us all the time, news cameras everywhere all the time, and just what is happening? We went from nothing to mayhem. And then, of course, there's people out to kill us. How do you even process that as an 8-year-old kid? And I remember everything was finally settling down 8 months later. My mom was finally going to come home for the first time in months. And I remember I was 8. Again, we were between 4 and 14 between my brothers and sisters. And we woke up. I remember the first day she came back, and finally we were going to get to start all over again. It was going to be great, considering, because I finally get my mom back. The first day she came home, I woke up to a gunshot. I was 9, and I was petrified with fear for about 5 minutes, laying in bed, thinking, "Oh, this is my day to die. They're finally here. The people that killed my father are here to kill me and my brothers and sisters, and that's just the way it is." But I was so cold. Had cold sweats, and I was so petrified. It was I was just making peace with the fact that I was going to die. Well, eventually we got up. I walked down the hallway. My sister went ahead of me. I remember very vividly her walking ahead of me about 15 feet, screaming her head off and running out of the room. And then I was like, what is going on? And I saw my mom laying on the ground at the end of the hallway. And I remember asking my sister, well, why is mom sleeping on the floor? And I remember walking up to her and discovering the gruesome scene. She had just shot herself right in our living room and in front of her kids. And it started the whole cycle of trauma all over again in my life, And I don't even know as an adult how a person can even get through something like that. I can't even imagine a 9-year-old going through a lot of that. And I remember just being completely devastated. And for the next 4 years of my life, I woke up every morning in the middle of the night, petrified with fear, thinking any noise happened. And I thought immediately, this is my last night to live. That was my reality. And I remember hating God. I hated any idea of God. I hated Jesus. I remember the picture I had of him as somebody that was just trying to torture people. And it's really the picture of the enemy that the Bible paints in our lives. That's the picture I had of God. It got twisted along the way. I thought he was out to get me. And everything that happened was because he wanted it to happen that way. I've come to discover a lot more than that, and a really beautiful picture. And he has retaught me all this stuff. And through a series of, when I remember about 13, and my heart opened up this much and just was so guarded against people and relationships, and especially an idea of God. And I just remember I was so lonely. I remember barely saying, God, if you're there and this picture is not of you, I'm open, but you're going to have to come find me. I remember thinking like these types of thoughts, and he sure did. Through a series of people that entered my life, normal people, they showed me value, and they spoke the father heart of God, the true God. They spoke his heart over me. I remember that. And it started me down a journey where this sounds maybe weird to some of you, but I remember he came so close to me, and he became my reality, where he was my best friend, the Holy Spirit, God, Jesus, all of them. I remember speaking like I'm talking to you right now, hours a day for years like this. And he retaught me so many things about his heart, his compassion, his grace, his redemptive ability over me. He retaught me so many things almost against what I had believed before that. And man, he went to extreme lengths. After that time, though, there was a period, I remember when I was about 16, of where all this intimacy, and he found me, and then he was like gone. That's what it felt like. And it felt like I went through these valleys, and like he was gone again. He wasn't really gone, but that's what it felt like at the time. It felt like I was abandoned and neglected, and all these old emotions came rushing back again of I'm alone and I can't really depend upon him, and he's forgotten about me. He's got bigger and better things, and my value and self-worth kind of shrunk. And man, that went into my early adulthood. And I remember when I was 23, I went to a thing. It was a ministry where they believed that Jesus would actually come and meet with you. And I was like, okay, I remember having these memories of him doing that. So I believed it. And I tried everything. I felt like I was doing all these great things for him. I was preaching and I was talking about grace. I was talking about the power of God. Yet inside, man, I just felt abandoned still, And I remember 8 hours into this prayer session that we had, and this was my last ditch effort. And I was finally like, oh, God, this is it. I just got to do everything. And I was done. And I remember 8 hours in and nothing. I was going through memories. I was trying so hard. And I said, finally, and I said this a lot, but this time I meant it. I am done. I can't do this anymore. I've tried so hard to find you. And I remember when I finally meant that, he said to me, he goes, finally. But I finally gave up. He goes, finally. He's like that's what he'd been waiting for the whole time. And then I remember this crazy movie started in my head. My brain goes a million miles an hour in different directions. This doesn't happen to me, this type of movie in my head. But what happened is he came and intervened in this type of way where I was sitting on a couch. It was this movie that happened. It was very real, very, very real. And Jesus comes walking in the room with his white robe. I don't know why he had a robe on, but he did. White robe. But I remember having all my junk. It was like boxes of goo that were black and ugly that I had tied to my ankles. And I also remember watching TV. I was watching TV and I was like, oh, when Jesus shows up after all these years of me doing all this holy work and preaching and reading my Bible, he shows up, of course, when I'm watching TV. And he rounds the corner, and I remember feeling this guilt and shame. And then I looked into his eyes. And when I looked into his eyes, everything changed. He came at me, and his eyes got really big and like bright. And it was like the highlight of his life was to be in this room with me. That's what he communicated with me through the work. And I was out through his look, and I was his ultimate delight. And I remember just feeling it. It was like he didn't have to say anything. And he came, wrapped his arms around me and gave a big bear hug. And I still thought, oh, I'm watching TV. I wish I was doing something more holy. And I remember him after he just communicated like this overwhelming sense of being delighted in love, and just, oh, I can't wait to be here with you. He sat down next to him, put his arm around me like this. He grabbed the channel changer out of my hand. He's like, okay, hey, what are we watching? And he started watching TV with me. Okay. And this whole time, now as I can process it afterward, he's just getting rid of this performance mentality in my mind. Like I have to be doing all these things in order to be loved and accepted. It's just not the truth. It's not the truth. He never saw my sin. He never saw the baggage. He already paid for all that stuff. He died so that he didn't have to deal with that baggage anymore. It's been dealt with. So he never once even acknowledged that it was in the room. It was gone. I could see it. He couldn't. He was blind to it on purpose. And he came, and then he's like, after a while, just hanging out and me just feeling waves of love come over me like I'd never felt from a father, never felt from anybody in my life. And he did that. He didn't even say hardly anything. He just being there with him was the highlight of everything. And he asked me this question. He's like, hey, Garrett, will you go with me to a few places? And I remember I'm like, okay, I became like a little kid in his arms again, just like hanging out with Papa. And I was like, yeah, I'll go. Let's go. And so he ended up, and I can't go through all the details of this, but he ended up taking me through about 6 or 7 different memories. And he went through healing different areas of my emotions, different areas where I felt abandoned, different areas of my performance mentality, different areas where I had thought God wanted me he wanted me because of how I was performing, how I was measuring up or lack thereof. He didn't want me because I wasn't. And he just he did like a ninja. He grabbed that lie out of my mind, and like 10 other lies that I didn't even realize were there, that were sucking the life out of my joy and my fellowship and my intimacy with the Lord. And he did it one at a time with a gentle way, with just speaking truth over me. And he took me to sports games to communicate this. He took me to areas when I was a little tiny kid. He took me to areas where I was an adult, where an arrow came into my heart that I received from loved people that I knew. And I had been carrying around that baggage and that life for years. He took me to those places, and he just took the arrow out and put truth in there about who I was. And he did it in a way that I didn't even know he was doing it. And at the very end of this, I was a little boy at the end of this, I remember again, and he said, he was going to leave. I could feel it lifting, this whole vision. And this is like 45 minutes later. And I remember saying, I remember saying, hey, can we do this again sometime? And he goes, Garrett, we can do this whenever you want. And I was so scared because I felt so long that I'd been trying to do this and he wouldn't show up. And so I was like, but how will I find you? Because I've been so hard trying to find him, that intimacy again. And I remember him saying, he goes, Garrett, you won't have to. I'll come find you. And to this day, whenever I call out for him, he's right there. He's right there in my imagination. That love comes back to me. Even in weak moments, he comes to me. Even in my dark moments, he is there delighting. I see him smiling over me, and it brings this passion and joy. And it helps me to walk not only just with my sins forgiven, but walked in a place where I'm living an abundant life that he promised. And I'm living as an identity, a renewed person of having an identity of a child of the King, of the loving heart of the Father now radiates through me, and it's healing other people. And his heart through me, all my pain has been turned on its head, and now he heals other people through me. That's the awesomest part of being a kingdom person. He'll take every ounce of pain that you have in your story now or in the past, or where people abused you, or where you felt neglected or abandoned, or you felt passed over, or you felt like, what do I have to offer? It doesn't matter. He'll take every ounce of that and he'll redeem it. That's what he promises to do. He makes all things new, and he keeps making it new. He keeps forgiving you. He keeps redeeming all the things where the enemy tries to steal and destroy in your life. He comes and gives you joy and peace and destiny, and he calls you out to bigger and better things. And what happens is he'll take your story, the place where you were wounded, if you'll give it back to him and continually to stay there and to go through the deep, painful process of being healed. And he'll love you through it. He'll comfort you through it. He'll walk you through it. He'll give you every resource. But if you'll take that journey, if you'll allow him to do that and to go through the years sometimes of that process, you will never regret it, because every tear will be redeemed. He'll give you double for your trouble. He'll take it, because what happens is he brings other people that went through similar things that you went through, and they're hurting. And the power inside of you will reach them at their deepest, darkest place and will pull them up. Jesus inside of you will pull them up, will pull them out of despair, will pull them out of loneliness. He'll minister to them through your story, because you get credibility, because you've walked through the valley of the shadow of death and you still have your hand in the hand of Jesus. That's my story, and it's continuing to be written every day. Not that there's never valleys. It's he's always with me in those valleys, and he's always redeeming every hurtful thing in my life, and he'll do the same thing for you. Everywhere you think you hurt, he will heal you. He will. He promises it, and I'm here as a living testament to the power of God in someone's life. And I didn't do a lot of the work. He did the work over me. I just jumped in the boat with him, and I stayed in the boat with him, and it's been an incredible journey. And he's calling you out to do the exact same thing with your story, your vision, and your calling. Who he's made you to be is unique and special, and he wants to redeem your identity first. He'll give you a new identity as his child. It's amazing. It's his, the child of the King. And then he'll resurrect your heart and share it with the world. He'll share it with your family. He'll share it with your friends. And all of a sudden, now you have a destiny that is redeemed, restored, and renewed. That can be yours. And it's what Jesus promises. Not me. I'm not unique. That is what he wants to do through your story. And your choice is today and every day. Will I let him do that? Do I trust him enough? Will I give him that space in my heart? If you do, you won't regret it.